Now, nobody told me 70 years ago that every time you get up to preach, if it's in a congregation of color, they're going to sing something just before you preach. And the congregation is going to say, now what you going to do after that? And there you go. If I can preach like Peter, if I can pray like Paul, and who y'all gonna sing like? but you ought to write that hymn. You can get rich off of that. Cause people of color gonna sing it every Sunday. Yeah, so work on that. Well, second thing is, I'm glad to be here. At 95, I'm glad to be anywhere. Yeah. Glad to be here. And but I'm glad to be here on this particular day. As Patrick indicated earlier, we've been working for a long time to try to make this day happen. And it happens today, and I'm very glad. And I'm very glad that it's happening on this particular day. Because it's one day that we can find an opportunity that people, and especially men of color, can find an opportunity to really show who you are. This is not a day that goes unnoticed inside of our lives, and it's one that I feel very good about being a part. So I want to thank Patrick for the invitation. I want to thank you for being here. And I noticed, I don't know what this is, but I think it's the check for being here. But it also says, do not open unless you continue to do good. So I'm going to put it back where it was, and you can tell me when I can open it. I'm going to reintroduce you today to a man of great character. Many would agree that Job had the highest character that is found anywhere inside these scriptures. The standards of ethical, moral, spiritual standards that are found in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the United States of America, the state of New York, Jamaica, Queens, First Presbyterian Church of Jamaica, you set your boundaries. What he said about Job, that there was no one like him in all the earth. Job is a prototype of the highest perfection that is possible for a mortal human being to attain. When Job went down to the community, young men backed up and let him have his space. Aged men rose and stood in his presence. Princes laid their hands on their mouths because they didn't know what to say in the presence of Job. So I'm going to say 3 or 4 things about Job, a man at his best. A man at his best possesses integrity. Job persisted in his integrity. He was not at war with himself. Men and women, too, who are at war with themselves often find themselves at war with people outside themselves. And therefore, somebody wrote it this way. within my earthly temple, there's a crowd. There's one that's brokenhearted for his sin. There's one that's impotent, sits and grins. There's one that loves his neighbor as himself. There's one that cares for naught but self and pelf. From such calamity, care I should be free if I could discover which one is me. Now Job didn't have that problem. Job had it all together. In fact, that's what we could say. Job had it all together. Secondly, Job was blameless and upright. Now, a thumbnail sketch of Job says this: uprightness or justice is one of the words of the Bible that talks about how good a person is. Job walked away from falsehood. Now, I know how hard that is, and some of you may too. If somebody's getting ready to spread something that's bad, you know the temptation to stand there and get all of it in. No, Job didn't do that. He walked away from it. He walked away from falsehood. It said also that Job hastened his feet away from deceit. Job did not go after what he saw in his eyes. We used to say back in Kentucky that sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach. I never knew what that meant. Nobody ever explained to me what it meant, but it must have been pretty powerful because I heard it about every other day. And the other one, no spot was able to cling to the hand of Job. A blameless and upright person was comparable to a finished product, complete, rounded, all together. Job was blameless and upright. Blameless and upright. His sense of manhood, his sense of fatherhood was such that Job made his children's spiritual life his life. And it's very interesting how he did that. Job had 7 sons, 3 daughters. And they seem to have been a pretty good party family. You know, they partied a lot. We know about that. So, but now, the one thing that we don't often do, if you're an adult, you don't go to the party. You really don't know what went on at the party. Job didn't go to the party. Job didn't know what went on at the party. But Job took no chances. He got them all together the next morning and had a prayer meeting. Because he didn't know what went on, what kind of spiritual atmosphere they had. So now, to be sure, let's don't worry about it. Let's get together. And that says something I think that we can say to men of color. It should not be left to the women of color alone to have the spiritual life that we need. It should be the responsibility of everybody in the house to have the right kind of spiritual life if we're going to raise the children that we need to raise. We cannot, and Job did not, feel that he could have a good family life if he did not have a family life that had in it prayer, opportunities to serve God. So every morning after the big party, Job said, come over to the house and let's have a prayer meeting. Another thing Job did. Job had a supportive attitude and action toward all of the less privileged folk. Those of us who are here today are privileged. And it should not follow that, and it did not follow with Job. Job would be concerned about the weak and the helpless. Job was concerned about the cold and the hungry. Job was concerned about the unemployed and the underemployed. Job had never treated other people contemptuously. He never despised anybody who had less than he had. Job did not withhold anything from any possibility of sharing it with other people. Job says, I cannot eat my morsel alone, and the father and the orphan person has nothing to eat at all. I cannot see anyone perish for lack of clothing, and the poor going without clothes. Job was concerned about all the persons around him. And so should all men be at their best. One more. Job recognized all persons as sons and daughters of one creator. Job did not become concerned about who made other people in the womb. Job did not concern himself about how other people were fashioned. There's a declaration of equality in all human beings. Job rises to the ultimate truth. We all have the same heavenly Father, and therefore none of us is better than anybody else, but also nobody else is better than we are. I learned that not from I learned that from my grandmother. She said, Jane Foster, you ain't better than nobody else, and Jane Foster ain't nobody else better than you. Now, I got that from my grandmother, which I put in on a Father's Day because Father didn't say that. But to create the creativity of what I'm trying to say, Job recognized that all persons had an opportunity to be who they are. So Job had all of these things going for him in his life. No, maybe there is one more. Job did not have anything else that he held back from his children. Job, and he said it in the opening passage that we read on the wall, Job was the wealthiest person in the land of the East. Oxen, cattle, land, the whole thing. So now here is this man, blessed by God, all of these things in his life, and finally more and more seemed to be overpowered, and then it happened. But Job did not let the riches that he had make it possible for him not to help other people. He said, I have been young and I have been old, and now I have not seen the righteous forsaken, as it said in that psalm. But he said, if I, as Job, if I make gold my trust, or call fine gold my confidence, if I have rejected and because of my feelings and wealth, I feel great, or because my hand had gotten me good, what I have, then you would stand before me as an iniquity to be punishable by the judges, that I should have been false to the God who made me. If God has blessed you, however God has blessed you, if God has blessed you, you are a man at your best. But God is the one who's blessed you, not for you to have a feeling greater than anybody else. Now, here is a man. 7 children, men, boys, 3 children holding prayer meeting every Sunday. Certainly after every big event in their lives. He's doing all this. He's blessed. He's blessed. He's blessed. And then, bam, Job lost all his wealth. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 1,000 oxen, 5,000 she-asses. Job, who was the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett of his time, lost it all, everything. Job lost a staggering amount. Zap! Job lost all his children. Job had 7 sons, 3 daughters. He lost all of them at one time. I don't know what that must be like. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do in preaching is to preach the funeral of a child 12 or 14 years of age. I don't think I've done it well. I've done it earnestly. I've done it the best I can. But what do you say? What do you say at a funeral where there is a child who had all of life before him or her? It's all wiped out. Job lost all his family. Job lost all his friends. Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar, all of his friends, they started coming around the house, sitting around, bemoaning the fact, there's something you're doing wrong, Job. Something you're doing wrong. God ain't going to do you like this unless you do it wrong. And then finally his wife, she didn't leave him, but she said one day, she said, why don't you just curse God and go on about your business? He lost it all. And then finally, zap, he lost his health. His ailments were such that they were horrible to look on. He was horrible to look at. He was in intense pain. Back in Kentucky, we said when things got real bad and you look bad, they said you look like death eating crackers. I have no idea what that meant. Wasn't ever brave enough to ask what it meant. And then when I went back to Kentucky as a grown person, somebody said, no, it's one more phrase in there. You look like death eating soda crackers. Now, I don't know what that meant, but it must be pretty bad. But Job looked like death eating soda crackers, sitting out outside the city, sitting on a dung heap, scrubbing his body. All of this to the man who at his best had finally been able to do so much. In the midst of Job's excruciating suffering, those of his friends had deserted him. His wife did not have a good word to say. And now, all of this thing that made him who he was. But now, remember this. Job did not whine. Job did not complain. Job did not surrender when misfortune, calamities, and hard times came to his life. One cannot fall down in the midst of hard time and lie down and stay down. You cannot snap and bite at everybody going by because things ain't going well for you. Somebody said it in there, did you tackle the trouble that came your way with a resolute heart and cheerful? Or hide your face from the light of day with a craven soul and fearful? Or our trouble's a ton, our trouble's an ounce. Our trouble is where you make it. But the fact is, you're hurt. That's contrived. But only how did you take it? We are beaten to earth. Well, what's that? Come up with a smiling face. For nothing against you to fall down flat, but to stay down is a disgrace. The harder you thrown, the farther much you bounce. Be proud of your blackened eye. It isn't the fact that you link that counts. It's how did you fight and why. Now, Job decided he's going to fight this. Job, the man at his best, is sent reeling and rocking by a series of devastating physical, emotional, unencouraging things. Job is without his family. Job is without his friends. Job is without his health. And Job is without any property. All of this has been taken away. He has no theory about how it happened and why it happened. The conflict between denial and affirmation. A struggle is going on between doubt and certainty. There's an unresting thing going on about what is going to happen to me in the midst of what I've done. It's getting tough in the life of Job. And Job found that he was caught in a tremendous struggle, a conflict between denial and affirmation, caught between a struggle between doubt and certainty, caught between wrestling between that which is revolt and that which is acceptance. And then he starts talking. I have not departed from the commandments of his lips. I never treasured in my bosom words except those that came out of my mouth. Oh, I knew if I could find myself, if I might find a place where I might say what I did. Oh, though he will slay me, yet will I trust him. But I would speak to the Almighty and desire to be heard. Then he said again, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. But I would speak to the Almighty. Oh, that I had one to hear what I feel. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty speak to my and give me an answer. Now, I said earlier today, and I'm going to say it one more time. There are 4 things that you should never do. Now, just remember these. Jim Reese said there are 4 things that you should never do. One is, do not spit into the wind. Secondly, do not pull on Superman's cape. Number 3, do not fight big bad Leroy Brown. And 4, don't go to God and say, God, give me an answer. Don't do that. And God said, okay, gird up your loins. I will question you. Gird up your loins. Remember Jack Nicholson in the movie when he said, you can't stand the truth. And God is saying to Job, you can't stand it, but you asking for it, I'm going to give it to you. God led Job through time of zoology, astronomy, meteorology, hymnology. He led Job on a trip that Job never expected he was going to do. God asked Job 70 questions. Now, I don't know whether you look at it comes on every Monday night or 6 o'clock when he asks all these questions. But he only asked 61 questions. God asked Job 70 questions. What he asked him where questions. Now, where were you? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where is the way to the building of light? He asked him some how questions. Who has cut a tunnel for the terrible rain? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts? He asked him some can questions. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades? Can you send forth lightning? He asked him some is questions. Is the ox willing to obey you? Is it by your wisdom and not the hawk's wisdom that a hawk sails? He asked him some do questions. Do you give the horse its might? Do you know where the mountains goats live? He asked him some shall questions. Shall a fault finder contend with God? Now that's, and then if you read through those last chapters, God kind of lets up, and Job comes up for air. He kind of thinks I got a space here. But God said, no, I'm going back. Shall a fault finder find fault with God? Can you contend with the Almighty? Anyone who has any ups and downs, you got to respond. Then he said, I am, finally got Job. Man at his best, finally got through it. He said, I am of small account what shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth, and then he continues. Will you put me, this is God speaking now, will you put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may look at the behemoth? Only the maker of the world can make an animal that big. I don't know whether you saw the movie this past week of about the Godzilla type things rising from the sea. If they rise from the sea, there must be some more in there too, but that's another sermon. Job thought he had known God. All the good things that he said in his life, he really was sure that he had found all the necessary for God, the immortality of his soul, his mind, feeling, opportunities, all of these things. But finally, Job comes to the part where he says, I had known and heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. He had knowledge as God reported, but now he had knowledge as God revealed. So if you want to be a man at your best, you got to know that you cannot be the one who makes the final answer. God lets Job's glimpse into another world. The gap between Job's knowledge and God's knowledge is as far great as you can make it, which makes me tell my last story for this time. A rat and an elephant were swimming in a pool. The rat jumped out of the pool and insisted that the elephant jump out also. And after 3 pleadings and 3 requests, the elephant came out of the pool. And the rat turned to the elephant and said, I just wanted to see if you had on my swimming trunks. To imagine that Job or you or Jim Reese, that I can know all about the knowledge and the reasoning and the power and the presence and the wisdom of God is just as ridiculous as a rat trying to wear the same swimming suit that an elephant wears. No, that's not what God has done, and that's not what I think he's brought us together this day. God has brought us together this day to hear that once upon a time there was a man who was the greatest of the sons of the East, and something happened to him. And he found himself in need of finding an answer. But he didn't go there and find it by demanding, God, tell me what the answer to that question. He found it by being patient enough to wait until God gave him the answer. Though simple and single, we must also sometimes wait and wage the battle hard and long. Minorities, and I'm not meaning necessarily racial minorities, since time began, have shown the better side of mankind. And often in the list of time, one who has made God's case sublime. Oh, yes. There is a sense of responsibility. There's a sense of being sensitive. There's a love that we continue to have because God has been good and God will be good. But we cannot demand that God give us an answer. We can find our way that God will give us an answer. And the answer that God gives us is an answer that really is the one that we need. So, have a good, happy Father's Day, and a good, happy next day, too. In fact, have a good, happy day the rest of your life. And live at your best, because God can help you be your best. Amen and amen.